نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. So inshallah today we'll be starting from death, the grave and the afterlife, inshallah. So previously we mentioned about the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and about prophets. But now inshallah they're going to mention about other affairs like death itself, inshallah. So page 27. It says, once the servant has completed his lifespan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands the angels of Allah to take his soul. When he is buried, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala returns life to a person, such that he comprehends the question of the grave and is able to respond. This experience that we all are going to experience one day, or go through the experience of death. Death is not going to be, obviously the experience of death itself, everyone will experience that. But the method and the death itself is going to be different, and everyone's going to experience it according to their a'mal, according to their state of iman and how they spend their life. So those who spend their life in obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their death is not going to be as painful or as scary as those people who spend their life in the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who spend their life in not following the commands and the rulings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we all die, and this is a fact that every single person will experience, you know, the aqidah and the belief of Ahl Sunnah wal Jamaat is that the prophets are alive in the grave, and we know there's countless proofs for that, the prophets being alive in the grave, worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like we know the night of Mi'raj, when the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam from Mecca to Jerusalem, he said on the way he seen Musa alayhi salam worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But prophets being alive in the grave does not mean that they did not experience death. Every single person, Allah said, "Kullu nafsin dha'iqatul maut." Every single nafs will taste death. So it's a given fact, even prophets experience the idea or the concept of death. So it's not something that, you know, some people, so if you reject that, for example, yes, like someone says that prophets are alive, the prophets didn't die, then that's rejecting Quran to be kufr. Yeah? So prophets do experience passing away, but obviously their experience is different than other people's. At the same time, when the soul is returned back to the body of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then the belief of Ahl Sunnah wal Jamaat is when the soul is returned back to him, is stayed in there. So hence when we give salam to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in namaz, for example, Assalamu alayka, then he responds to our salam sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the prophets are alive in their graves, worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But here he mentions that when a person is buried and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala returns life to that person, this is known as, you could say, the life of barzakh. So in an easier way to understand is, between this life and the hereafter there will be a middle life, you could say, like a waiting room. So some people are going to experience that wait in a blissful way, and others are going to experience that way in a through torment and punishment. So when this person is placed in his grave, the angels, two angels, Munkar and Nakir, they come to this person, they sit him up and they ask him, "What did you say regarding this man?" So before they ask you about this third question, the first question in your grave will be what? Mar Rabbuk. Who is your Lord? So this is the first question we're going to be asked in our grave. Ma Deenuk, what is your religion? And the third question will be what is mentioned here. What did you used to say regarding this man? Right? So this is the third question that will be asked in our grave. So the ulama have mentioned here that if you look at this statement, what did you say regarding this man? And even in the word this in English, what's that used for? Someone who's present, right? If the person wasn't present, what do you say? What did you say about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? What do you say about him? When someone is present, what do you say? What do you say about this person? Right? So this is used for someone who's present. Same in hada. Hada is the alternative for the in Arabic, right? So they'll be asked, what do you say fi haqqi hada rajul? What do you say regarding this man? So the ulama have mentioned that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam either will be present in your grave at that time, or the veils will be removed and you will be able to see the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in your grave to answer these questions. So now it teaches a lesson. Anyone could say then this is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, get away with it. No, our iman is going to speak. How we lived our life. Did we live our life according to the teaching of the Quran and Sunnah? And then in our grave, when we answer the questions will be regarding the way we lived and spent our life. Right? It won't be on that day that we'll be able to make things up and say what we want. We're on page number 28 at the top, inshallah. So, from the third question which will be asked in the grave is this question: what do you say regarding this man? And the ulama have mentioned that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one opinion is that he'll be presented to your grave. He sallallahu alaihi wasallam will be present. Others have mentioned that the veils will be removed and you'll be able to see the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then you will answer that question. If the servant was a believer, he will respond that this is the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I bear witness that there is no God but Allah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. And the two angels will say to him, we know that you would have said this. I.e., they will testify, they will agree to this person, his shahadat. Then he said, then his grave will be expanded for him 70 square cubits and filled with light for him. And then it will be said to him, sleep. The person will say, shall I return to my family and inform them? And the angels will respond, sleep like a newly wedded bride who will not be wakened except by his beloved family. And then the servant then remains in that state until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala resurrects him on Yawm al-Qiyamah. So this is just briefly mentioning the experience that we're going to have in our grave. Those people who will be able to answer these questions, it mentioned that the grave will become wasi for them, they'll become expanded for them. Even though if we were to dig the grave up, it'll still be the same grave that we buried them in. But the realm is different now. They won't be in the you could say the world. Their realm, or they're between the two, the akhirah and the dunya. So which is known as alam al-barzakh. So they'll be in this middle world. So or the ulama also mentioned that, either the grave will become a garden of Jannah for them or a pit of the hellfire. So for the believers, it'll become wasi for them, it'll become open for them, and it'll become a means of peace for them. And this is really one of the signs that that person will be entering into Jannah. Okay, so this will be one of the first stages where he answers answers correctly. It will be a sign of his dying on his iman. Then on the other hand, you have the munafiqeen, the hypocrites, those who pretend to be Muslims in this world. What will happen to them on Yawm al-Qiyamah? What will happen to them in their grave? He says, on the other hand, the munafiqeen respond to the question by saying, we heard people say something, so I said the same thing, but I'm not really sure. Right? So I don't know. But people said it, so I just said it as well. So they really didn't believe in their hearts. Just one as a side note, something to bear in mind. We can't call anyone a munafiq now. You know, at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, people were labeled as hypocrites, right? You had Muslims, you had Kafirs, and then you had those pretending to be Muslims, but they were inside, they were Kafirs. They are known as the munafiqeen, the hypocrites. Now, after the time of the Prophet ﷺ, we can't call anyone a munafiq. Because at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, we had Quran revelation coming down, we had the Prophet ﷺ being told by Allah, so it was divine. So those people who were labeled as munafiqeen, that was from Allah, because Allah knows the state of their heart. But for us, we don't know the state of someone's heart. So if someone, you know, for example, he claims to be a Muslim, we can't say to that person, you're lying, just a hypocrite, you're not really a Muslim, you're trying to deceive the Muslims. We're in no position to say that to anyone. Why? Because we don't know what's in their heart. We give, the fatwa is given on the zahir, whatever's apparent. So if someone says I'm a Muslim, you treat him like a Muslim. Someone says I'm a kafir, you treat him like a kafir. Right? So there's no middle ground for us now, because we're in no position to say to someone, oh, you don't really believe, you're just lying, you're making it up, you're really a kafir, you're lying to us. Even though they might be doing that, and munafiqeen do exist, but we're not authorized to say to someone that you're a munafiq. Right? But obviously if someone is a kafir, they make the kufr apparent, then you obviously say to them you're a kafir. These days people are scared to call someone a kafir. You know, in the West, in the media, they make it seem like kafir is a swear. Or they call us kafirs. And they make it seem like it's a bad word. It's not a bad word, it just means you're not Muslim. Right? Someone who doesn't believe into the conditions or the rulings of Islam. So if, for example, a teacher says, I'm giving a random scenario, right? A teacher is another Muslim and says, ISIS call people kafirs, and they say all kafirs go to hell. Do you believe I'm a kafir because I don't believe in Islam? You should think, yes, that's true, because Islam says if you don't believe in the Quran and the Prophet ﷺ, you're a kafir, simple. But in the West, they made it seem as though that the scenario which just gave you, nice. If you say yes, you're a kafir to the teacher, it seems to be rude, doesn't it? Why? Because they made us believe that it's rude. Same way they're going to try to brainwash us to make us believe that speaking against LGBT, speaking against, you know, homosexuality, being gay and stuff like that, they can consider that if you say that to someone, you've done wrong. You're going to feel guilty. The way if you swear at someone, you feel guilty. They want you to feel guilty by saying to someone that whatever Islam says, and you oppose that, basically, to accuse someone of that, or saying someone you're a kafir or homosexuality is haram, they can make you feel guilty for saying that. But as a Muslim, we don't feel guilty. Why? Because this is the kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah said, this is the rule, that is the rule. No matter what the law says of any country in regards to homosexuality, we as Muslims still believe it's haram. If someone wants to do it, that's their problem. We don't say to them that, we don't force people to stop. Ya lakum dinukum waliya din. For you is your religion, for his mine. But we should be clear about our religion. Like for example, you know, in the Shah Jahan Mosque, I think it's one of the first mosques, right? I don't know if you guys seen this week, that they had the people from the church come in and they've done the choir thing that they do, and basic kufr, right? They sang those songs in the mosque and all that, and the mosque allowed it and gave them the mic, gave them the stage, and they had the choir of the church there reading the kufriya kalam in the masjid. Just to fit in, we don't give our own principles away. This is something important. You know, even though we live in a non-Muslim country, it doesn't mean we abandon our Sharia. We still, the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it fits in every country, every community, every culture. The Islam is perfect. It fits in every place. So we don't need to change our Sharia, our rules, regulations, just to fit in. We are already fitting in. Right? So we are ready. We don't need to sacrifice anything to fit in. Like Islam doesn't restrict you to wear salwar kameez, for example. We're allowed to wear jeans, we're allowed to wear shirts, we're allowed to wear all the Western clothes, for example. There's no restriction on clothing. We're allowed to have certain hairstyles, we're allowed to dress a certain way, we're allowed to go certain places, or certain places we're not allowed to go. Certain clothes we're not allowed to wear to uncover our aura. These are the rules set by Islam. So if I was wearing, like you're wearing an abaya, for example, a jubba, right? I'm wearing salwar kameez. If we made it too short, more than our aura, then it will be haram, no matter what shape it is. If we wear jeans, it's allowed. If you wear shorts, it's not allowed. Right? So the restrictions have been put there already by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it fits in all cultures, all societies. So we don't need to make sacrifices on our iman and our core tenets of our aqidah. So anyone who is a kafir, he is. But we're not saying that. Allah has put the laws in place. Anyone who is a homosexual, for example, right? Or believes that he's gay, and whatever these modern things they teach you in schools and stuff like that. If someone asks you, do you agree to this? No, I don't agree to this. Why not? Because I'm a Muslim and the book of Allah says it's haram. Simple, that should be your answer. No shying away. So this is where we slowly, if you're going to be shy about one thing, sacrifice one thing, then consider you're going to sacrifice all of your deen. So keep your iman strong. And the Prophet ﷺ did say, towards Yawm al-Qiyamah, holding onto your deen will be like holding onto hot coals. It will be that difficult, right? But even in this time of difficulty, holding onto our iman, we will get more reward than those people before us who they applied more than us and we are applying less. Why? Because we have more fitna, we have more difficulty, more challenges now. So even holding on to a little bit of our iman, what we can hold on to, we should keep held on to that, inshallah. So he mentioned here the munafiqeen, they will obviously say, oh, we just said it because other people believed it. We are saying it, we said it as well. And then the angels will respond to them, we surely knew what you would say. It then said to the earth, constrict upon him, it does so such that his ribs will put out of place. The ulama mentioned that, the grave will squeeze those people so much that your rib cage will go like this, basically. Yeah, your ribs will be squashed together. And obviously, a person on the outside can't see what's happening inside. But that will be the hal and the state of those people. And that's how, the grave will become constrained upon them. Then he mentioned that he remains there being punished until Yawm al-Qiyamah. He says, this question appears for every dead person, whether young or old. So you have the three questions, ma rabbuk, ma dinuk, and what you say about the Prophet ﷺ that mentions here. The third one they gave here, the first two they haven't mentioned here. So these three questions will be asked for anyone and everyone. A child, an adult, a Muslim, a non-Muslim, everyone will question about this. The difference of opinion is our Prophet's going to be asked, but the main Ahl Sunnah opinion is Prophets won't be asked about these questions. But there's an ikhtilaf in this. But the main opinion is that the Prophets won't be asked these three questions. Then it said these questions occur after the soul is returned to the body so that the deceased can answer Munkar and Nakir. So the two angels that are going to ask you these questions, they're known as Munkar and Nakir. And they'll ask you these three questions which they mentioned here regarding your Lord, your religion, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. After that's for the munafiqeen and the hypocrites they mentioned, and the first one they mentioned was for those who believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then it says here, after the believers respond, it is said to them, look to your seat in the fire. This is after the believers respond, Allah has replaced it for you with paradise. So the believer sees both seats, i.e. Jannah and Jahannam both will be shown to the believer. Right? This is a maqam of a position where you thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sometimes seeing a difficulty or seeing a hardship and that you're not experiencing but other people are seeing, It's a form of blessing that it should remind us. Like, for example, someone who is poor, they don't have any food. When we see that, that should remind us and do shukr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, make us thankful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So that's the purpose of us being able to see difficulties and hardship. Why? It makes us grateful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah, thank you for not putting us in this situation. Allah, thank you for not making us from the fuqara, the masakin, the people who are poor, they don't have any food to drink, they don't have shelter, they don't have clothing. So when we see these people, it's not something to look down upon. Okay, so this is something we need to keep in our mind. You know, sometimes when we give sadaqah, we give zakat, we think we're doing that person a favor. Right? But in reality, that person is doing us a favor. Because if it wasn't for him, how could we get our ajr? If it wasn't for that poor person, imagine there's no poor person, who are you going to give your charity to? Who's going to be there to remind you of Allah, and Allah giving you the blessings of clothing, food, shelter, and so on. So the existence of poor people, that's a sign of a blessing for us. And they're doing us a favor. Right? And when I do them a favor, so it's something to keep in mind. So here the person will be shown his seat in the hellfire and his seat in Jannah as well. On the contrary, he says, it is said to the disbeliever or the munafiq and the hypocrite, after he's saying that I don't know, after he doesn't know about who is his Lord, who is his religion, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, you do not know, and you never recited the Quran in your life, then he is then struck with the iron hammer once, causing him to bellow and shout. A shout heard by all, other than men and jinn. So the adhab, here what I'm referring to and reminding you is that a disbeliever, his adhab will start, punishment will start straight away. Right? So it's not that we're going to wait until Yawm al-Qiyamah, the hisab and kitabs that happen, then when they go to the hellfire they'll be punished. No. The reminder is that the punishment will start in the grave. Okay, so it's not, it's also not only that the disbelievers are going to be punished. Mu'mineen who spent their life, or believers who spent their life in disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their stay in the graves will be difficult as well. Right? So Muslims will all, like we know, all Muslims will go to heaven. But after, some of them will go straight to heaven, some of them are going to go heaven after punishment. So that's why, you know, we advise not to do sins, not to miss our salah, not to disobey our parents. Why? Because we will go through difficulties if we fail on these responsibilities that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set for us. So it's important that, so that's why it's mentioned here that the person will be struck by a hammer, that the azab of the qabr will be heard by everyone, i.e. other than men and jinn. So the other makhluqat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the other creation of Allah, they will hear the punishment of the grave. Right? We know that from the khasiyat of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, from one of his miracles, he could hear people, the azab that people were going in, experiencing in the grave. As we know from when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Sahaba were traveling, and he got a branch and he split the branch in two, and he placed one on one grave and placed the other one on another grave. Why? Because he sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so he could tell of the hardship that they're going through in the grave. And why was it? Because they never refrained from urine drops on their clothes. Because they never refrained from the urine drops on their clothes, then they're going through adhab in the grave. So this teaches a lesson, don't take things lightly. I've seen a picture that someone sent me, you know, in Mina, in a Hajj, they have put the urinals there, you know, standing up and urinating. First thing, it baffles me, because if you're wearing your ihram, how could you stand up and use the, it doesn't make sense, right? Because either you have to lift the whole thing, or you have to open your ihram. That doesn't make sense to me first. But at the same time, it teaches us adab, that even when we're urinating or using the toilet, we use it such that we don't get our clothes impure. If we are around animals that we herd and we have a dog, maybe a cat, then even their urine we keep in mind as well. Their impurity we keep in mind as well. So it's not only about you refraining from your own urine or impurities, also pets and animals that we have as well. So we need to make sure our homes are pure, our clothes are pure from all these impurities, because that could be a means of us getting punishment as well in our grave from not staying pure, i.e. if our clothes are impure, then we will salah in impure clothes. Right? So it can have a knock-on effect on our ibadat as well. He says the punishment of the grave then is a reality for disbelievers as well as some of the disobedient believers, which I mentioned already. And the bliss of the grave is a reality for those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills. Inshallah, we'll stop here for this. But the last point they mentioned here is very important. The last thing they just mentioned here is the ease and the opening of the grave will be for whoever Allah wills. In reality, us going to Jannah is only based on the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's out of the mercy of Allah we're going to heaven. We're not going to Jannah because of our namaz, of our prayer. We're not going to Jannah because we were too good and we deserve it. Because one blessing of Allah, even like the eyesight or the hearing, is far greater than all our worship. Put our worship and even all our life of worship on one side of the scale, one blessing of Allah, the eyesight. The blessing of the eyesight is far greater than our ibadat. Right? So we can never ever pay Allah back, even for one blessing. And imagine the blessings we have. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells in the Quran that I've given you so much that you can't even count. Right? You can't even think of how much, you can't even think about it. Never mind even physically count. Right? So anyone who will be going to heaven, anyone who is going to get the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or the rewards Allah has given or promised us, they are only based on the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to show us His mercy, to pardon us and forgive us. Out of His mercy we're going to enter Jannah inshallah. So inshallah, if you have any questions regarding this, please do let me know inshallah before or next lesson or whenever inshallah. We move on to the purification, page number 48 inshallah. I'll try to do both parts before the mark inshallah. Sure. He said, on page 48, so the chapter about wudu is complete. Okay, so if you have any questions about wudu, the things that break the wudu, all that should be done and dusted with now. So now that we've got to ghusl, this can be obviously a bit, you could say, inappropriate for different ages, but obviously it's something far that we all need to know. So it's important that we keep these in mind as well, inshallah. So if you have any questions, you can write them down and ask, inshallah. So it says the following three actions are fard, obligatory of ghusl. So the three things in the Hanafi school which are fard in ghusl, which you have to do, otherwise your shower doesn't count. The first is rinsing the entire mouth. So this is one fard of ghusl. The second is rinsing the nose up to the hard bone. Sometimes people sniff the water and it goes to the head and you get a head rush, right? That's not fard. You don't need to do that. You have to wash it up to the hard bone. So if you slightly do it, then it should easily reach up to the hard bone of your nose. But sniffing water all the way up until it hits your, I think it hits your brain. I don't even know the science behind it. Yeah? Sinuses. Yeah? So obviously that can cause you injuries, and so you should avoid doing that. But generally, sniffing or washing the nose inside up to the hard bone is fard. Rinsing the entire mouth is fard. These two things are fard. And the third fard is washing the complete body. Head to toe, the full body needs to be washed. So any of these three things are missed in your shower, you are still considered impure. So if you pray your salah is invalid. If you perform any tilawat of Quran, it's invalid. Why? Because you're in janaba, you're considered impure. So this is in the footnote, they're just giving a bit more detail, right? But generally, full body means full body. So full body means, for example, if you're overweight, then under your flap, basically, your belly button, if you got, for example, you have thick hair, all the way to your scalp, washing under your hair, and I don't know, your moustache under your, wherever it is, all the different parts, different folds of your body, and all your private parts, every single part is included. Right? So you should make sure even under your basically fingertips, under your fingernails, all that is part of the fourth part of ghusl. So your whole body needs to be washed completely, entirely, inshallah. So these are three things are the fard of ghusl. So these three things are the fard of ghusl that need to be completed. So anyone who misses them, the shower is considered incomplete, inshallah. So main thing and the best way, like just as is this a question related to this? So which one?
In regards of the ghusl, does the 3 steps have an order? Does it have to be in a specific order?
In the Hanafi school, you know, some, like for example, even in wudu, the order is not fard. So in the Hanafi school, the tartib or the order is not fard. Whereas in the other school, I think in the Shafi school, the tartib is fard, right? So like Allah says, for example, wudu, Allah says, فَاغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ إِلَى الْكَعْبَيْنِ. So Allah mentioned wash your face, arms, hair and feet. So because that's mentioned in the Quran in that order, the other schools have held the opinion that washing in that order is farz as well. Right? But in the Hanafi school, you gotta be easy. You just have to wash them any order, it doesn't matter as long as you've done these 4 things. Same with ghusl, it doesn't matter it doesn't matter the sunnah is to do in the order. Right? But if you done it in the wrong order by accident or you forgot, then your ghusl is still valid. And so that would answer the question. But generally, like, as an overview before I go into the detail of ghusl, something to keep in mind, the best way we should actually perform ghusl is first, use the toilet. If ghusl has become fard on you because of marital relationships, then the passageway, or you had a wet dream in the night, for example, the passageway could have the impurities inside the passageway, right? So first, the other is you use the toilet and you do your business in the toilet. Then you do your istinja, then you do your wudu, and then you do your ghusl. If you're doing this tartib, then you're definitely pure, right? Because when you, for example, they mention that ghusl becomes fard when certain liquids leave the original place in the body, right? So when they, through whatever experience you have an experience, when they move from the original place in the body towards the exit, some things will come out. Some will still be in the passage. So when later, imagine you had a shower and then you start walking. When you start walking, they might exit the body then. So then the ghusl will come farther than you again. That's why it's important to use the toilet first, make sure everything is pure, everything is clean, then do istinja, purify that area, then you do your wudu, and they mentioned that don't wash your feet because you're going to go in the shower, all the water goes to your feet, then you do your wudu, then you jump in the shower. Now when you've done your wudu, you rinse your mouth already. So even if you forgot in the shower, you've already covered it through wudu. You rinse your nose already in wudu. So if you forget it in the shower, then at least you've already done it in a way. Right? And then you wash your body, and they're going to mention the method, you start from it 3 times, i.e. pour your water on your upper body, your head, and then your right side, and then your left side. And you cover your body 3 times. That'll be considered like 3 washes. But the best way is this way. So you use the toilet, purify yourself, you istinja, wudu, and then you have a ghusl. But they mention the different information now. So the first thing they mentioned, the 3 fard of ghusl, which are rinsing the mouth, rinsing the nose, and washing the entire body. The third, next, washing the hands until the wrists. And then they mention here, so main thing why they normally mention washing your hands first. Why do you think they mention washing your hands first? Because our hands are, let's see, because we're going to use our hands to clean the rest of our body. Are you going to be scrubbing your face, arms? Obviously you're going to use your hands. If you haven't purified and cleaned your hands first, and your hands are dirty, then obviously you can't purify the rest of your body, right? So first you make your intention, then you wash your hands up to your wrists, then you wash your private parts, any impurities, and you clean off your body. So any impurities that were on your body through the process that made ghusl fard on you, then you remove and clean those impurities, and then you perform your wudu, and then you wash your entire body. Like I mentioned the step already, the detail which I mentioned, the 4 things, that's the sunnah order. Now they mention here, ghusl is of 3 types. First one when ghusl is fard. So then where ghusl is wajib, and then where ghusl is sunnah or nafil, you could say. Number 1, ghusl becomes fard by 3 things. 3 things make you shower fard upon you. First thing is when semen leaves the body, right? So that could be through having a wet dream, for example, right? So that's when a man becomes an adult. So if that happens to you, that's when the night or the moment you become baligh, you become an adult, your namaz and all these things become fard on you. Normally when you hear this is fard to this, for example, reading namaz, paying zakat, and they say when you're an adult. When you have this wet dream, that's when you become the adult Islamically. Okay, so before that, technically you're still Islamically you're still a child. Then, but obviously it says here that leaves its normal place inside the body through pleasure. So normally a wet dream will be through that reason. Sometimes it could be that it leaves the body through an illness, because of an illness. So now that won't make a ghusl fard, right? It has to be through the purpose of through pleasure. This also, includes, people perform a haram action, which is very common amongst youngsters. I don't want to mention the action itself, but when they use their hand to remove semen from the body, right? So that is also that is haram to do that. But that also makes a ghusl fard on you. Okay, so anyone who does that, or which they shouldn't do, which is haram, is bad for your health, is bad for your future marital relationship, is basically it has no positive. The natural way Allah has given you is basically the wet dream. That's how Allah has naturally given you a system inside of our body. When the old semen needs to be replaced, you have a wet dream, it comes out, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replaces it naturally with fresh. So you don't need to, or sometimes, I know someone who went to a doctor's and the doctor prescribes them to do that. Even if a doctor prescribes you to do that on whatever grounds, generally it's prohibited. You should get fatwa from ulama and ask ulama as well. So you should, like I mentioned, there's no obedience to creation in the disobedience of Allah. Yeah, so anyone who tells you to disobey one of the commands of Allah, you don't obey him. So the first, number 1, is straightforward, which they mentioned here. So any of the liquids coming out the body, and in Arabic this is known as Madani. Okay, so there's different types of liquids that can come out, you can say a man's private parts, apart from urine. Okay, so not all of them make ghusl fard. The one is called Madani, that is basically described in more detail in the footnote. Okay, so you can read that in your own time, inshallah, which is straightforward in the footnote. Next, number 2. And that's straightforward. those who understand, you're old enough to understand, and those who don't understand it, then don't worry about it. Number 3, for women, every month they experience a bleeding, right, from their private parts. That this is something men should know about as well. Why men should know about this is, like I had a youngster, he was reading his namaz, right? He was praying in his salah, and his sister wasn't praying. And because he didn't know about this, he physically was forcing his haram to pray, and he was being harsh on her. But she was like, I can't pray. He was like, are you disabled or something? You can't pray. What do you mean you can't pray? But there's a certain time in the month when every woman, this is not an illness. Okay? Some people say it's an illness and a woman, the defect. If a woman experiences this, it shows that she's healthy and she can have children. Okay, so naturally there's a few days in the month when a woman bleeds from her private parts, and this is a sign that her womb, where she carries children, is healthy and is basically clearing itself up for the youngsters in an easy book for you. So when a woman is going through those days, she can't read namaz, she can't fast. So if you ever see one of the women in your house eating in Ramadan, for example, and don't, sometimes people do that, they'll be like, the youngsters in class have said that to me, like, oh, my mom doesn't fast, right? It's not because she doesn't fast, it's because she can't fast on those days. So it might be 5, maximum 10 days. It could be every month it happens, right? So if you see a woman eating in Ramadan, for example, or a woman not praying her salah, you pretend that you didn't see that. So in Ramadan, if you see, for the youngsters, this is, if you see one of the women in the house eating, you pretend that you didn't see that happen. Okay, why? Because they're not allowed to fast or pray in those days. So don't be going around saying, oh, I've seen you eating, and shame that person, because those days are something secret a woman keeps from everyone else. She doesn't tell anyone these things, right? So when you say publicly, I've seen you eating yesterday, you weren't fasting, now basically you've exposed it in public, and that shouldn't happen. So keep that in mind. So there will be certain days when a woman, but when those days stop, then the ghusl becomes fard. That's what I mentioned here. Okay, so when those days stop and her bleeding stops, then shower becomes fard on her, and then she needs to have a shower, then she can pray her salah. Second time they mentioned here is when it's wajib for someone to do ghusl, for someone who becomes a Muslim while they were impure. This obviously same as fard in a way. So they just put it technically. Why? Because when the person becomes a Muslim, then the namaz becomes fard on him. Even he might not know the words, he still has to have the izzah, respect for the time, do the action at least. Whatever he knows, he needs to do that. So he needs to, i.e., go have a shower straight away. But the number 2 and number 3, you could say in a way they're both fard. Number 2 falls in the same category as number 1, really, to easily understand. Number 3 is, it says recommended nafal. Like I mentioned last time, nafal is not only for optional things, or anything apart from fard or wajib falls in the nafal. So sunnah mu'akkada is nafal, sunnah ghair mu'akkada falls in the nafal, mubah or mustahab action, they fall under nafal as well. Mustahab action, they fall under nafal as well. So here, nafal is broad, right? So for the Friday prayer, is sunnah mu'akkada normally, is the emphasis sunnah, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would do ghusl for Friday prayer. The 2 Eid prayers, when he says you have a shower for Friday prayer, right? Or he says have a shower for Eid prayer, is you go in, you pray the salah with the shower, i.e. when you purify the shower. Like for example, I woke up at Fajr time, I read Fajr, I thought, I might still have a shower now. So I had a shower 5 in the morning for Jummah, and then I went to sleep, I went to toilet, and then I done fresh wudu for Salatul-Jummah, right? Technically, I've not done the sunnah shower for the Jummah. The proper sunnah shower is that you done the shower and you attend the Jummah with that shower. Not that you went toilet or done that, right? So that's why it's sunnah to try to delay that shower closer to Jummah time as possible. Same with the Eid Salah. But if obviously if you can't do that, for example, you're going to school, you're going to work, and obviously you might need to go to the toilet, is about your intentions. So if you did the shower before you went to college or before you went to school, before you went to work, then you had to go to the toilet, Allah knows, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, right? Your actions are based on the intentions, your sunnah will still be fulfilled. Same with the Eid prayer. There's also sunnah to mustahab, they mentioned nafal, to have a shower or ghusl before wearing the ihram for umrah or hajj. Same is sunnah to have a shower on Yawm al-Arafat, on the day of Arafah. For those people who are doing hajj, this will be on those who are doing the hajj at the moment, will be Friday for them. So because they're going to be in Arafat on Friday, and obviously we're doing following the local sighting here, our Eid or the 10th will be on Sunday. For those who follow Saudi, they will be on Saturday. But Arafat is the 9th of Zulhijjah, right? Corresponding to our local sighting will be Saturday, but in Mecca, corresponding to their sighting, their opinion, it will be on Friday. So the Hujjaj will be in the plains of Arafat on the Friday coming. Before I forget, as a side note, there's no lesson next week. So I mentioned Friday, so I remember next week there's no lesson because I'm going to forget to mention it. So there's no lesson next week. And so entering Mecca. So the ulama mentioned that one of the other of entering Mecca, Sharif or Medina Sharif, both of them, Makkah Mukarramah, Medina Munawwara, you perform ghusl out of adab, you enter those cities out of respect in the state of ghusl. Also they mentioned here, when you go to visit the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to give your salam at the road of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam inside Masjid Nabawi, you know where the green dome is, those who hamam bil Hajj or Umrah or Medina Sharif, under the Masjid Nabawi where the green dome is, that's where the grave of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is. So when we go there, we give our salam to the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he responds to our salam, right? So the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam can hear our salam. Even when we read Durood Sharif here, for example, the salam is presented to the court of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So we should, in abundance, read Durood Sharif on the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So these times are when it's sunnah and mustahab to perform ghusl. The next ghusl is not necessary after the following things. This is, remember I told you that from your prior parts, apart from urine, 3 things come out apart from urine. The first one, which was I mentioned in detail when you have a wet dream, that is known as Madani. Okay, so there was in brackets the row after that, and number 1 on the last page, they wrote the word Madani there. Now they mentioned 2 other words. One is called Wadi and one is called Mazi. These 2, one, it comes out before you experience a wet dream, for example, right? So it's called, in a way, pre-discharge. That it won't make ghusl fard on you, but your wudu will still break. So before you have a wet dream or any other way that can come out, right? A clear liquid will come out. So they give the description at the bottom. So they gave a description of what semen looks like, what makes ghusl fard. But now they give a description at the bottom what these liquids look like as well. But if they come out, one is like, for example, before you urinate, right? The passageway, it needs to be, you could say, lubricated. So when we urinate, it doesn't hurt us. So inside, our body doesn't feel pain when our urine comes out. So Allah naturally created a system within our body that the passageway becomes easy for the urine to come out. So before you even urinate, you might notice there's like a clear liquid. It won't be urine, but it'll be a different kind of clear liquid. But that does not make ghusl fard. Some people think, oh, that came out, that might make ghusl fard, now I need to have a shower. No, it doesn't. That's just to make it easy for a person to urinate. So both of these things are mentioned in detail, how they look, and when you might experience them exactly. Okay, so when a man, basically, simply put, when a man gets excited, right, that's where one of it comes out. You don't have to go the full length and have the full experience. We're just getting excited. It'll make your wudu will break basically, but your ghusl won't become fard. But when you have the full experience, then your ghusl will become fard. That's the slight difference. Inshallah, we'll. Another thing they mentioned here, you might think that you had a wet dream, but you might wake up and there's nothing there in your clothes. The ghusl doesn't become fard like that. Just by mentally having the dream, it doesn't make your ghusl fard. And the next one is by inserting an object into the prior part or even a finger, it doesn't make a ghusl fard. And this can happen for different reasons. Like for example, someone has a medical illness, right? And then, like for example, someone who might have experience of blood coming out the prior part, then an object might, like a camera might be inserted by the doctor inside the prior part, that won't make ghusl fard. Even though an object has been inserted into the privates, that won't make your ghusl fard. Inshallah, we'll leave it at there. If you have any questions, we'll address them.
There was one question. If you have a cut or wound, would it have to heal to become purified?
Inshallah.
Regarding the ghusl?
No. You know, have you done cuts and bandages? I don't think we've done that yet.
No.
We're going to do that next lesson, inshallah. But I'll just let you know now anyway, because you might have a cut or something, and then the wudu you might. If you have an injury like a cut or anything like that, for example, normally imagine I'm cutting an apple and I'll cut my finger. I'll put a plaster on there. When I do wudu, I don't need to remove the plaster. Why? Because if I remove the plaster and the water goes inside the cut, it might get infection. So now Allah doesn't want to harm us. Allah wants us to stay safe, right? So if you have a bandage on, even if for example someone broke the arm, you have to wash the full arm, body, don't you, the ghusl, right? But if you've got a cast on, how are you going to wash underneath your arm? You don't have to. So anywhere you have casts and bandages on, or any plasters or anything, that the illness is still underneath there, you still know the injury is still there, you can just wipe over that part and go wash the rest. Okay, so you don't need to remove the plasters or anything. But if you think that it might be healed, or you know that, look, if I take the plaster off, nothing will happen to me, or it won't get worse, it won't bleed, then it's better for you to remove that. But if you know the injury is still there, then you keep the bandage or whatever it is. You might have burnt your arm or something, you might have cut yourself, it could be anything, you might have broken your limb, you got cast on, then you just wipe over that part and you wash the rest of the. That's same for wudu and same for ghusl as well. Okay, so that inshallah, that's how that is. Inshallah, we leave it at the next lesson will be tayammum. So sometimes I know people are shy to even send the questions forward about this topic, but if you have any questions, then you can just write them down and you can give it to them in private, inshallah, and I will address them in lesson, but no one know where the question came from, inshallah.